We really try as much as possible to make sure that this landscape looks just like it did during the Dooley's time. And so if we lose a tree in this portion of the property, we replace it with something that was exactly the same, if we can trace back the fallen tree to the time of the Dooleys.
This is a place that is irreplaceable in our history. It's part of our culture, it's part of our economy, and it's really a special place. And getting people into it to see it, we can all be part of nature.
Production funding for Virginia Homegrown is made possible by
Strange's Florist, Greenhouses, and Garden Centers, serving Richmond for over 90 years, with 2 florist shops, 2 greenhouses, and a garden center, located throughout the Metro Richmond area. Strange's, every bloomin' time.
and by
Welcome to the 25th season of Virginia Homegrown. We're so excited to be back gardening together. Today we're highlighting trees with a focus on large and old trees. We're going to learn what makes a tree grow to a majestic size while others fail and become a tree cookie. Before we get started, I want to remind you to send in your questions on our website, vpm.org/VHG. We'll be answering those a little later. In the second half of our show, we will tour the Dragon Run watershed on the Middle Peninsula to learn about bald cypress trees and old-growth forests. But first, I visited Maymont in Richmond to talk with Sean Prietti about the many state and national champion trees growing in the historic park. Let's get going.
Maymont was originally the home of James and Sally Dooley. This was their home and estate from 1893 to 1925. And that's when they established this arboretum. Sally Mae Dooley was an avid horticulturalist, and when they purchased the land, it was farmland, which they began cultivating into beautiful English-style park, and that parkland includes the arboretum. We know they went to Europe many times, and we see that reflected in their Italian gardens, but they clearly had an interest in Asia as well, which we also see in their trees, as well as our famous Japanese garden.
Sean, I do love this tree. It's so beautiful. It's so big and majestic.
This is one of my favorites too. This is the blue Atlas cedar. It's from the Atlas Mountains of northern Africa and was therefore part of the Dooley's program of bringing in trees from all over the world.
You know, they picked some amazing specimens. They really did. So this tree is so big though.
They don't start that way. Blue Atlas cedars look a little scraggly, you know, for the first 30, 35 years of their life, and then they really, you know, come into their own much later. But this is one of our champion trees here. So meaning of all the Blue Atlas cedars in the entire state of Virginia, this one is the biggest of all.
That is so cool. So what makes a tree a champion tree?
Pure size. You have the diameter of the trunk of the tree, you have the height, and then you have the width of the crown. And then each of those 3 categories is given a point number, and then those points are added together, and that makes the overall score.
So the highest score wins.
That's right, the biggest tree.
Well, this certainly is deserving of that.
Yes, but you don't have to be a huge tree to be a champion. You just have to be the biggest yourself that you can be. So, you know, some of our champion trees like the tiger-tail spruce by the fountain,
Yes.
or the Japanese tree lilac, they're not necessarily impressive trees that anybody would come and notice that it could be a champion. They're just really doing the best that they can to be themselves.
Yes, the biggest of their kind.
That's right.
Within these beautiful 100 acres, how many champion trees are there at Maymont?
It changes all the time. We have about 15 to 18 right now, and even I have to go on the Virginia Tech Big Tree Database website to find out exactly how many we have, because sure, one of our trees could fall down and lose its champion status, but equally, somebody else could realize that they have a champion in their own yard, and then ours gets bumped down the list, which has happened many times before.
Yes, and it's variable.
Yes, and it's fun because it makes it a competition, right? I personally love the fact that if somebody looks at our deodars and goes home and thinks, you know, I think mine's probably bigger, and measures theirs, let them have it.
Let them have it.
Yeah.
At least they're becoming tree aware.
Exactly.
So tell me, what is a dually tree?
A dually tree here at Maymont means a tree that goes back to the original estate. And we kind of go back and forth on the definition sometimes for purposes of data collection, whether, like in the case of this blue Atlas cedar, this tree was here when the dualies were here.
Yes.
But behind you, the elms, those trees weren't there when the dualies were there, but the dualies did have elms there. So depending on kind of what function we're trying to express, like either of those may be considered dually trees.
These trees were planted on a private estate, but now they're growing in a public park. So what are the challenges they face with that new, I'll say, use of the property?
Violent. You know, sometimes it's like little boys hitting them with sticks, and they can't really do that much damage. But, you know, we've also had people just rip branches off of them. You know, I think people just are not as in touch with the natural world anymore, and they don't really realize that these are fragile organisms.
And that
you
they're
know?
living organisms.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah. So how do you take care of these majestic trees?
There's all kinds of ways. With old trees, the main thing is to not do anything that shocks them. We often use compost as like a low-grade fertilizer. We use wood chips to basically help the soil biome and keep all those microorganisms in there and keep the soil healthy.
Mm-hmm.
But you never want to fertilize a tree and shock it by putting a lot of growth on it. So we just, you know, kind of try and keep them happy. The other thing that we do is trying to preserve the structure that's there, as opposed to doing like radical pruning.
Mm-hmm.
So we will use cabling, which allows the tree to move in tandem with wind shear instead of having certain segments of the tree be exposed to wind shear individually. Similarly, you can use brace rods, and that does the same effect to not stress some of these limbs. The larger trees may have overextended limbs that hold quite a lot of mass far away from the trunk. So we
Right.
want to try and keep all of that mass centered.
Mm-hmm. Well, speaking of mass, we all know that some big trees are actually like big sails. What else
That's
can you
right.
do to help with that situation, with these crazy storms that we're getting?
That is one example where pruning is kind of beneficial. What you can do is do crown thinning to take out portions of the interior of the tree, and that allows the wind to pass through the crown of the tree without catching so much of that surface area of the leaf.
So you're not just scalping off the tree, you're going in and making
Yes.
judgment calls as to what pieces to remove.
Yes, and it really, you never want to remove, you know, 20-25% on like young trees, and on old trees significantly less than that. So it really requires having an experienced arborist be a guide.
Yes, and I'm sure there's many arborists that help here at Maymont.
We with the significance of these trees and the significance of the property, we try to never make decisions just one person making that decision. We try and have it be a team of specialists.
Yes, so careful, so important.
Yes.
But when a tree does start to decline, are there any action steps that you go, oh my gosh, what can we do?
There are. So we have a couple of trees that are suffering from bot canker, which is really, really common with cherries. Many cherries will get it over the course of their lifetime. But one thing that we've done recently is we air spaded the roots and reintroduced biochar into the soil. And that's something that we're starting here, and we would love to make it kind of more of our program. So we're trialing it a little bit right now. The first year that you've disturbed that soil, you're going to want to make sure that that plant stays nice and watered, same as you would any new planting. Basically what we do is we take a 250-gallon tank and bring the tank there and just kind of run a hose to the base of the tree and let it soak that entire area. You can use a sprinkler system as well.
Do you water any other big trees around here?
Rarely. Usually once a tree is past 2 years of its establishment, you don't normally need to water it, but during really prolonged periods of drought, we will water some of the more prized specimens, let's say.
Well, Sean, I applaud you on everything you're doing here, taking care of all of these specimens and just keeping them alive and strong and healthy for
people to come and enjoy now and in the future. So,
Well, and thank you for all the work that you've done for the same program.
you're welcome. We make a great team.
That's right.
Mrs. Julie was very interested in making sure that she bought the best. So whenever she was seeking out new plantings for her estate, she was buying the best ones she could find from all over the East Coast. Our current philosophy is that we do try to replace in kind whenever something is lost of the original collection. You will continue to hopefully see Maymont just as they saw it 100 years ago, 100 years from now.
25 years ago, I was a guest on the debut episode of Virginia Homegrown when Richard Nunnally interviewed me about restoring garden beds at Maymont. Little did I know I'd become the host one day. The other guest on that first show was my friend Bill Pode of Bartlett Tree Experts, who discussed pruning trees. Well, today Bartlett is back on the show. So Dr. Glenn Percival, thanks for joining us today to help kick off our 25th season.
Yeah.
But we're going to talk more about how some trees are able to live so long and new research on the life inside of trees. But before we get started, remember to send in your gardening questions on our website at vpm.org/VHG or through Facebook. Well, Glenn, I've not really had many guests who brought Petri dishes and tree cookies and dirt, so this is going to be interesting. So, wow. I mean, I took care of beautiful, majestic trees my whole career, and I always wondered, why are they bigger than the others?
Okay, well, thanks for inviting me. It's a real pleasure to be here. And it's great to kind of talk about some of the research I was doing in the United Kingdom. And we have a lot of big old trees in the UK.
Yes, you do.
And what we tend to find is really one of the major obstacles, as it were, can be like diseases. So, for example, elms are big trees, but if you get Dutch elm disease, you've got a lot of problems. In the UK, we have a disease called acute oak decline, which is killing a lot of our oak trees.
Oh, yeah.
And we decided to do some research and try and work out if there was maybe a very different solution to managing this disease. And what we did find was that some trees were very heavily infected and had lots of bleeding cankers. And other oak trees at the side of it were showing no symptoms at all. So, for example, what not many people realize is when you actually look inside a tree, they think it's sterile. They think there's absolutely nothing living within the tree.
Just a bunch of wood.
But in reality, I mean, trees are absolutely rammed full of bacteria and fungi, which don't do the tree any harm whatsoever.
Interesting.
And we call them endophytes, as in endo within and phytes within the plant. And what we decided to do was, when we actually had these diseased trees, was we wanted to look at, was the endophytes living within a diseased tree different from a non-diseased tree? And I just wanted to show you just what I mean by this.
That's amazing.
Where we can literally, I mean, this is just some, very few of those thousands of different types of living organisms.
Absolutely amazing.
And then one of the great things about research is you suddenly find a result which is absolutely incredible. And one of the fungi we actually identified, which were present within the non-diseased trees, was penicillin.
Oh my golly.
I mean, Sir Alexander Fleming, penicillin antibiotics. And we actually found that the non-diseased oaks we identified 6 different species of penicillin and 2 we couldn't even identify.
Oh, wow.
And if we actually look at the top here, this looks like one of the species of penicillin. And then what we also then decided to do was we took all these good endophytes, as it were, and we had a disease tree, and we literally infused them into the disease tree, and the disease tree started to heal.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And we just suddenly thought, wow, you know, this is great. You know, this potentially opens up, and we see this time and time again, where we have a population of trees, same species, some are heavily diseased, and some have very little disease. And we're now learning more just about the incredible important role these endophytes play in longevity, in like some trees, species will do well on soils contaminated with heavy metals, and the endophytes have been shown to play a crucial part in their survival. And it's something we never think about.
No.
We just think trees, perfectly sterile.
And we think if the tree has a problem that it has to be something either abiotic or biotic, meaning is there's a fungus, is there disease, is there
Yes.
insects?
Yes,
We don't
yeah.
think, about the makeup of the tree itself. But what does the role of soil play in all of this?
Well, you see, there's two major factors that kind of really influence longevity. And one is what we've just spoke about, is obviously preventing the disease ingress, is really soil. 90% of all tree problems we see above ground are caused by problems below ground. Now, as you can see, this is a nice, healthy
Yeah, that's gorgeous.
soil I took from one of our forests close by. Lots and lots, plenty of root growth. Now, that's great in the forest environment, but we like to grow our trees in urban landscapes, our towns, cities, car parks. Sadly, it's a very different type of soil. And with all due respect, I mean, trees would find it incredibly difficult to live that longevity growing in soils like this. It's very cloddy, gets compacted, dries out,
Yes.
etc.
Etc.
So we like to do a lot of work at remediating the soil.
Yes.
And one of the things we try to do is, even though we have these urban soils, like we'll apply these different types of mulches. And this is a very common one,
Yeah.
which is used, which is the
Pine tags, pine needles.
the pine needles.
Yes.
Now, personally, I don't think this is really a very good one. I think they are better ones. And what I would actually more recommend if you are to apply the wood chip mulch
Right.
is use maybe something more that has, like you can see here, like more the leaves. And the advantage of, if you apply a wood chip mulch high in leaves, it degrades quicker, you get the benefits quicker, but you have to replace it in essence after a year.
Yes.
That's all.
So
you can use one that, again, which is really more just heavily,
it's more woody.
as you can see,
Yeah.
it's more woody. It
Yes.
has the same benefits, it just takes a little bit longer, but it lasts longer. You maybe need to replace it every 2 years. And really, to me, applying a wood chip mulch is really a fundamental factor in achieving longevity. Because in urban landscapes, we have a very bad habit of raking up all the leaves. And leaves, obviously, in a woodland environment, rot back down. So we can counteract that by using these wood chip mulches.
Well, Glenn, this is fascinating. It's fascinating to learn about penicillin within the tree, and it's also fascinating to, I'll say, re-emphasize the importance of mulch, and not just any mulch, but mulch with leaves. So I thank you so much.
No.
Yes. And now we're going to get ready to answer your questions, but first, Sarome Hamlin has tips to share on understory plants that you can grow if you're lucky to already have a big tree in your garden or some shade.
So I've heard the best time to have planted a tree was 20 years ago, and the next best time is today. So today I'm here at Colesville Nursery to think about trees, but also thinking about the understory. These plants really need to be able to take some shady and possibly some dry conditions. I've got a variety of plants that I've found here. So we can start here with this beautiful Camellia japonica. We've got this white one here blooming, and everybody loves camellias. It's a very popular plant. And one of my favorite plants, though, is our native Hydrangea cordifolia. This one is still holding on to its leaves from last season, but as you can see, during the fall season, you get this beautiful red, purple tinge to the leaves before they drop. And then in the spring, you get a white cluster of blooms throughout the shrub. Here we've got a nice evergreen shrub. This is our native rhododendrons. This one is Florent Park, boosts nice purple blooms for you in the season, and it is an evergreen, so you can have a 4-season shrub. Over here we have Leucothoe, again, another native plant, but look at the different varieties. So we have this one here that turns purple in the winter, but look at this foliage here, nice variegated foliage. This one is called Leucothoe Rainbow, and it gives lots of interest for 4 seasons. Moving along, here we have Alyssum, another native. wow, it just seems like to be running a trend here. But Villisum, common variety, you can see is green, but through breeding, we have different cultivations where you get a variegated variety here, or even a chartreuse or yellow foliage. Now we've got the shrub layer done, let's move on to ground cover. Now over here, we've got an array of hellebores, very easy plant to grow, so many different colors and varieties. Cast iron plant, this is a very tough plant, evergreen. It can take really dry, shady conditions. It can take really deep shade and still be happy. Here we have a selection of Carex. These two here are Asian varieties, but you could see that they're a nice chartreuse color or variegated form and interesting blooms early in the season. This here with this limey green is our native, and this Carex will start spreading and getting a nice mass, and you can actually even use this one for a lawn replacement. So if you're planting big trees or you have established big trees, don't forget to think about the understory. You can have an array of plants that provide nice shelter for wildlife and nice views for yourself. So get out there, let's get our hands dirty and plant the understory of our trees.
And now it's time for our favorite part of the show, when we get to hear from you. So send us your gardening questions through our website, vpm.org/VHG, or on our Facebook page. If you visit us on Facebook, you can also see our first episode from March 2001. It's fun to look back. Many thanks to Sharon, who was the first person to call in that day with a question. She kicked off 25 years of providing answers to your gardening questions. Well, Shanna Williams is here to join us and to talk about the questions you might have here today. So welcome, Shanna.
Thank you.
Yes, so what do we have? Can we get started with good stuff?
Well, Glenn, first of all, your presentation was fantastic. And I've learned so much about the life of the plants, I mean the trees themselves. Is there anything else that you would like to add?
I think one of the areas of research we are doing, I could only touch on it, is we know we make these wood chip mulches. But we often forget that many of our pharmaceuticals, our medicines, are actually derived from trees. So we've been doing a lot of work with what we call a single species mulch. So is a mulch made purely from apple better than a mulch made purely from oak? And that's actually giving us some really interesting results. So for example, we find some species of tree are very good at enhancing tree defense systems, where other trees, like fruit trees, for example, are very high in sugars. And when we apply them, we can stimulate root growth and a lot of below ground activity, a lot of biological activity, which is really good when trees have maybe been damaged through construction work. So we feel there's a whole area of research within there, just looking at individual trees and how we can use them for different purposes, that's all, to protect the tree against a disease. So for example, eucalyptus, a mulch made purely from eucalyptus has been shown to be excellent at suppressing the Phytophthora disease. So it's used extensively in the avocados in Australia, etc.
Wow, that's
so it's just
interesting.
opening up new ideas. I think it was Socrates who said all answers lie in nature.
Yes.
And I think there's a lot of truth in that. So we kind of developed this technology.
Yeah.
I mean, one thing that I find is extremely interesting that it seems like the systemic system of a tree is similar to our human bodies.
You know, there really are similarities. I mean, believe it or not, trees have immune systems. And one question I always like to ask my students is, what makes a successful disease successful? Why does Dutch elm disease only kill elms? Why doesn't it kill anything else? And one of the reasons why is a successful disease is a disease that can attack a tree without the tree realizing until it's too late. And what we can do is we can, again, by using these types of like biochar, which is a very common soil amendment now, and using these, again, these single species wood chip mulch, in essence, prime the tree immune system, you know, boost it. So when these pests and diseases arrive, it's in a far better state to kind of handle them, that's all. And we always forget that pest and disease ingress is normally associated with stress. periods of drought, waterlogging. So I've always had a heavy focus on treat the patient, do everything possible to make the tree healthy. Forget about the disease. Healthy trees look after themselves.
It's so interesting he just said that because, you know, I was just thinking about my own trees, and earlier today I literally just put leaves in wood chips around this huge tree, these elm trees that line our street.
Yeah.
And it just makes me smile knowing I'm doing the right thing.
You're doing the right thing, Shanna. Because the other thing about trees, though, people need to realize is that even when it's young, you know, an old tree, as we had talked earlier, to me is like a freight train. And putting chips around it's the best thing you can do. By the way, Shanna lives on this beautiful tree-lined street. It's all willow oaks and it's gorgeous. But these old trees, I'll say, process things slower and react slower, where a young tree has a bit of a faster reaction time as a reaction to stimuli or any of the influences. So, I mean, people need to understand, too, that it's not apples to apples from a young tree to an old tree.
That is so true. I mean, we can treat a young tree and you do see a rapid response, but in many cases you can treat a tree with an old established tree 1 year, but you see the benefits the following year. And as I always like to say to my students when I'm trying to explain it to them, you know, like on The Lord of the Rings with the tree Emp, and they're all very, very, very slow. Trees take time to turn around.
They do. They really do. And I know that air spading is very popular and putting compost in biochars, but when you do that, you have to understand you're going to see it a year later.
Yes.
The benefit. It's not like that. So.
Actually, what you just said kind of answers our question, because one of the questions was, when a big tree starts to decline, at what point is it difficult to arrest the decline?
Yeah.
You know, that is a great question. And to me, what I like to do is leaves are what really produce the energy through photosynthesis. So to me, when I look at a tree that's going into decline, I personally look at the leaf area coverage and how green the leaves are. The more leaf canopy you have and the greener the leaves, the more the tree is able to make energy. And if a tree can keep producing energy through these periods of stress, it just allows them to recover quicker. Same with us. They always say, when we're ill, you've got to eat a lot of food, you've got to keep your calorific intake high. And to me, that's the same with trees. So I always kind of have, once you start to maybe have lost something like, you know, maybe 50% of the canopy, then I would really start to be concerned, because we always forget, you know, all the wood inside the tree, the sapwood, the roots, it's all alive, it's living tissue, and the tree needs to keep it alive by giving it energy, and trees get their energy from the leaves. So to me, I always focus on the canopy coverage and how green the leaves are.
And I think also it's important to, you know, just mention that canopy coverage, the root systems also expand that far into your yard as well. So it's not just a root of the tree that you need to apply mulch in the leaves and everything else.
Yeah.
And actually, that even goes beyond the canopy.
Further, yes.
It changes, but sometimes it's 2 times the height of the tree. I mean, you've got roots way far out. We have seconds before. Do we have a quick question there?
When is a big tree actually, basically I already did that one. How do drought conditions affect big trees?
Really what it does, it kind of affects what we call the hydraulic conductivity. Trees are constantly pulling up water and it's being evaporated out through the canopy. But once you start to get that, you know, there's not enough water in the soil, you kind of get that, it starts to pull in air and oxygen, you get like the cavitation, and that's really what it causes. It causes like the hydraulic system inside the leaf, you know, inside the tree trunk to basically start to collapse, that's all.
Is that where some of the hollowness inside the trees might develop?
No, that's from the rotting wood, but
yeah.
Anyway, That's all the time we have right now, though. Oh gosh, Glenn, I could ask you 100 questions.
Yeah.
But we look forward to answering more questions later in the show, so please keep them coming. And Glenn, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you.
And next, Shanna traveled to Mascot to tour the Dragon Run. The watershed has been designated by the Smithsonian Museum as the most pristine site in Virginia and one of the most ecologically significant areas on the Chesapeake Bay. So let's take a look.
We have over a dozen species of trees here at Tita Cain Nature Preserve. Of course, we have our beautiful bald cypress.
They're
we
huge.
have American beech trees, and we also have very large swamp chestnut oaks here, which have a invaluable food source for wildlife in the acorns that they provide.
They're absolutely beautiful. And what do we have here? I see some seed pods.
So this is the American hazelnut, and right now the catkins are forming, it's releasing pollen, and several months from now we'll start to see fruit form, the form of tasty little nuts that you can snack on as well. They're the same nut that you see in the grocery store.
So something to look forward to when I come back. You were telling me earlier that you identified over 1,600 species of flora and wildlife.
Yeah, so our citizen science team has taken the time to identify all these wonderful species in the watershed and have identified almost 100 different species of plants that previously weren't known to occur here in the watershed.
So as we walk through here in different parts of the season, I should see various types of wildlife and different flora growing up.
Mm-hmm.
I see some woodpecker damage here.
Yeah, so this tree, whether it's dead or in the process of dying, is hosting larval species of insects that are boring in the tree. And the woodpeckers are taking advantage of that available food resource by, sloughing off the bark to get to those insects.
And it's interesting that we see so many things that look like damage, but it's actually the forest replenishing itself.
Yes.
And the wildlife. In the distance all around us, I see pawpaw trees, a pawpaw grove.
Yeah, so this is the perfect environment for a grove of pawpaw, these really rich riparian soils. And we have a really nice population of zebra swallowtail butterflies because the caterpillars host on the leaves. Mm-hmm. But then there's also a lot of wildlife like raccoons and deer that will eat pawpaw as the fruit matures in the fall.
And over in the distance here, I see almost like a little valley and a body of still water.
Yeah, so what we have here is a vernal pool. So these changing water levels are really beneficial to species like salamanders and frogs. In the late winter and early spring, these pools fill up with water and it provides habitat for these different species to breed. But then also in periods of drought, these water levels recede and it provides the opportunity for species like bald cypress to germinate and recruit into the next generation of trees to fulfill in the ecosystem.
What you guys doing in here is amazing. I would love to learn more about the Friends of Dragon Run.
Yeah, our president, Jeff Wright, will definitely be able to answer any more questions you have and tell you more about the organization.
All around us, I see these cypress knees. Can you tell me what their purpose is?
Their purpose to provide amazing support to these enormous trees that get over 100 feet tall, because the tree is set in water, and as the water is moving fast, these are the stability that keeps the trees in place, help prevent erosion, a lot of other things. And you'll see the top of these here have been chewed on by beavers, and that's a normal in the course of events in here.
Jeff, in the distance over there, I can see a huge bald cypress tree. Now, what I want to know is, this looks like it's a couple hundred years old. What are some of the ages of the trees in this forest?
It is. We have trees of every age. That's what's magnificent about old growth forest. But we have trees over 100 years old, hundreds and thousands of trees over that, some over 500, but we have some select trees in here that are estimated to be over 1,000 years old. So the bald cypresses really go on. They've been hit by lightning. You'll see some of the tops taken off them, but that's a multi-century tree there. And as you go up the Dragon, you're going to see many, many more trees of 100, 200, 500 years old. It's amazing to know how old these trees have been here and what they may have seen in Virginia's history.
Now, you're the president of the Friends of Dragon Run, as well as the president of the Old Growth Forest Network. What are you trying to accomplish?
Very similar missions, but a little bit different. The Friends of Dragon Run were trying to protect this incredible swamp that is renowned, documented by the Smithsonian Institution as one of the key places in Virginia that needs to be protected. And this is our 40th anniversary, and this group started out in 1985 as a few people that wanted to protect that piece of land over there. Now we're up to about 600 acres, but we'd like to add more volunteers, more acreage, because we're really focused on protecting lands along the edge of the Dragon for generations to come and generations forever.
So the Dragon Run actually is bordered by 4 counties.
Correct.
And the stream is approximately 40 miles long?
It's about 40 miles long. It twists and turns. It starts up really on the border of Essex and King and Queen County and then works its way down Middlesex, Gloucester, and then into the Piankatank. So this is the headwaters of the Piankatank, which then flows into the Chesapeake Bay.
And you mentioned that you have 2 segments that are classified as the Old Forest.
The Old Growth Forest Network is trying to protect a property in each county around the United States so people can have an accessible experience in old growth. And one of the properties that you're looking at over here is actually in the Old Growth Forest Network. So we are very proud in the Friends of Dragon Run that 2 of our properties are in the Old Growth Forest Network. The Old Growth Network is looking at forests that have reached past the maturity level, are not of uniform age single species, and have the wonderful complexities you see here. You see hardwoods, you see softwoods, you see all kinds of understories. So depending on what the species are in your area of the country kind of defines old growth. But the big thing that defines old growth today is mature trees and a commitment that you're not going to take those trees and harvest them. So to get into the Old Growth Forest Network, it's that protection of a mature forest and making it accessible.
Jeff, why is it so vital that we conserve this beautiful natural resource?
The big thing is what you see here. The big commodity that everybody needs is fresh water. And it's a challenge because the aquifer is drying up in this section of Virginia. This water is very important for irrigation, for agriculture, very important to protect all these natural species and systems out here. As we get more people living close to the water and everything, and we have industrial concerns that may want to use water, particularly data centers and everything, there's a challenge to try to make sure somebody's raising their hand and saying, what about nature? What about future generations?
And that's what you're doing.
And make sure we continue to do that. We like to be a voice to speak for the forest and for the Dragon.
Jeff, in meeting you, what I've observed in just a short period of time is that your love and your passion for this place.
It's fabulous.
And the one thing that I know is just a short period of time, I have a better appreciation for old forests and groves. So I really appreciate everything that you've done and what you've shared with us.
We have a great team out here. We do have a great team.
I had the joy of taking a tour of Dragon Run a few years back and was amazed by everything I paddled by. I applaud the Friends of Dragon Run for all the work they do to manage and protect this delicate ecosystem. And now we are joined by Greta Hoyt from Manchester Gardening to talk about another type of plant we frequently encounter when looking at big old trees, vines. Well, Greta, you're another Virginia Homegrown alumni, and we welcome you back to help celebrate our anniversary season. But before we begin, remember to send in your questions through our website, vpm.org/VHG, or through Facebook. Well, Greta, you've got a lot of sticks and stuff here.
I do, but I want to first talk about how can these vines climb up trees?
Yes, and these big old trees that we have.
Big old trees, and what makes it possible is all of these nicks and crannies that they can sink their tendrils and suckers and roots into. So if you can see these examples show that it's very easy makes it easy for them to climb up.
They have things to hold on to.
So things to hold on to. We have English ivy and poison ivy here, and I wanted to bring this to the attention because a lot of people get them confused.
Yes.
For a number of different reasons. But one of the big reasons, English ivy is evergreen, so you can see that they're in the trees now all over, you know,
Yes.
the James River.
Highly invasive.
Highly invasive. And then poison ivy are native, which has dense matted roots that are much darker than the
Very
kind of
short,
short little nebby roots of the English ivy.
Right.
This is harder to get off trees. I mean, they're both hard to get off trees, but this is much easier to get off trees.
Yes. And when that poison ivy gets really large, it becomes a mass of roots, very, very fuzzy.
Yeah.
So it's easy to
Yeah,
ID that.
all the way, fuzzy all the way around. Whereas English ivy, it's really kind of fuzzy kind of on the bottom
on
of
the bottoms. Yeah.
Yeah. So for English ivy, when people are trying to get rid of that, we like to cut, a foot or 2 foot between the trunk and the base of the ground. And then once it falls off the tree, it kind of gives you this kind of neat little architectural look, and it does not have any roots on it. So
Right.
this is English ivy, not
Yes.
poison ivy.
Yes, definitely. Kind of architectural.
I think so.
Yeah, make a nice art project. But what's one of your favorite vines?
One of my favorites is crossvine. I just love the fall and winter color because it keeps its leaves during the winter, and it gives us these beautiful orange tubular flowers that hummingbirds love in the spring.
Yeah.
It can be a little aggressive, but it's one of our natives that is beautiful.
It is. I grow it on a fence at my house, and I love it. And I've grown it, for years at other places too. So, but then there's this one. This is a very well-known one. But
Yes, this is our Virginia creeper. And this little guy grows with tendrils but has like a little sucking disc on it that allows it to really easily grab onto any surfaces like houses or anything really.
Really anything.
Yeah, because
yes.
it can grow on the ground as ground cover, and it gives you a beautiful fall color. So in addition to the beautiful fall color of the poison ivy, we have the beautiful fall color of the
Virginia creeper.
Yeah.
This one here, a lot of people are saying, we should, use a little more because many of our pollinators love the flower of this plant, and our birds enjoy the seed as well. So this and the, crossvine or bignonia are good plants to have.
Yeah,
in
and
the
we should
right
use
spot.
them more. Yeah, as long as we can kind of keep them under control.
Yes, but this one prunes well.
Yes.
Very, very well. So you've got some other ones here, and this one here, what I really like is the difference in the textures. And here it is wintertime, and we're talking about different vines because vine ID is so tough in the wintertime. It's so easy, it's much easier to ID plants
When
with
they're
the
in
leaves.
flower.
Yes,
Of course they are.
But here you've got some characteristics of these two vines that will help you identify them.
Yep, this is our native coral honeysuckle. As you can see, it's got like striations in the bark, and but this guy is climbing hydrangea, and it's got nice little flaky bark, kind of like river birch, that gives you really interesting winter interest. It blooms in the summer, kind of like a lace cap hydrangea bloom almost.
It's very pretty.
It is very pretty, and it can grow on trees, much like the form of poison ivy, where it kind of grows up and then kind of sends shoots out like that. So it looks very similar in that fashion too.
And I find it can grow in shade very well, but it takes a little while longer to bloom. It has to become established.
Yeah, well, it takes a long time for it to become established as well.
It's a slow grower.
It's a slow grower,
Yeah.
for sure.
Unlike the honeysuckle vine.
Yes, where the honeysuckle will grow, I don't know, probably 20 feet in a year,
Yes.
in a season, but give you some beautiful spring and summer blooms for all those little hummingbirds and little pollinators.
All those fun little things. And
Yeah.
there's different cultivars that you can buy with different colored flowers. And
Yep,
it's,
yellow and pink, and
it's a favorite of mine.
It is, me too. And I like it when it grows together with roses. I think that's
Yes.
really fun.
Very attractive. Which,
Yeah.
we need to think about. We're talking here about vines on trees, but there's other uses for them as well.
Sure, to provide portals into the next garden space, to make that exciting entryway, transition that I really like to incorporate into designs.
And as a landscape designer, yes,
Yes.
you would. So Greta, thank you.
Thank you, Peggy.
so much. And next, we're going to answer more of your questions. But first, Dr. Robin Puffenbarger has a tip to share on how you can start growing your own big tree at home. It starts with the roots.
So how do you get a big tree? Well, you can start by collecting seeds and nuts. So here are a couple that you might find around your yard. And the acorn, though, as you can see, has this tiny little hole. A worm has already gotten in here and eaten the nut. So this is not going to sprout to give you an oak tree later. So if you're not able in fall to collect nuts, what might you do to get your big tree? Well, you might think about riding down the road to the local nursery and buying a tree. And what you're going to find, beautiful trees, great looking trunks, awesome looking branches and leaves. And what may be a little bit off in the nursery is this ratio of 3-part root to 1-part stem. And if you go to the Virginia Department of Forestry, you can find lots of native trees, and they grow over 5 million trees in Augusta County at their Cremora site for Virginians. And they have a host of native trees that you can find. I have 2 species with me today. I have the northern red oak, which is a tree of our forest all across the state of Virginia. And then I also have with me sycamores. These might be trees that you have seen on your stream or creek or riverside that has the beautiful white bark, really beautiful tree that will tolerate having its feet wet. So it will grow in more marshy, wet spots. And both of these are available through the Department of Forestry. And what they are doing is they are going to grow the tree, and when they're pulling them out for you, you're going to get this really nice root mass and a much smaller trunk area. That's so that the tree is going to establish, because it's this root system that's going to get the nutrients and the water out of the soil for this upper canopy. So what you want to do is, if you are planting this in your yard, if you're putting it in a spot with turf grass, make sure you cut a very large circle, about 3 feet in diameter. You're going to want the tree right in the middle. You're going to want to loosen the soil up, and so that you can get these roots all spread out, you're going to want to dig the hole a little bit deeper, several inches at least deeper than the roots. And then, of course, that nice 3-foot circle, you're going to put them into that hole up to this point where the stem meets the root. And you don't have to amend the soil at all. These are native trees to Virginia, so whatever we've got, red clay, nice loamy soil, they'll take it. They're adapted, so don't try to amend your soil. You just want to keep the turf grass away, because turf grass, your lawn, and trees are competitors for all kinds of things, especially water. Once you've got the tree in and up, you may want to stake it just to kind of keep it straight, and then water it really thoroughly, mulch it. You could use wood chips or other mulch that you have on hand, and just keep the grass away as the tree gets established. And over the years, you will see that you have a beautiful specimen coming up, and so you can enjoy your tree for years to come. Happy gardening.
As Robin shared, big trees start with small seeds, and during this show, we're learning other factors play a pivotal role in the process as well. And now we're going to take more of your questions, so go ahead and send those in at vpm.org/BHG. So let's see what we have here. Well, we've got one here that's, we were talking about favorite vines. So what are more favorite vines? Like, Shanna, what's your favorite vine? Do you have one?
Yeah, the honeysuckle. I love pulling it up, getting it out of my fence.
I get that. Well, Greta, do you have another favorite?
I love clematis. I think it's just, it comes in so many different varieties and different temperaments, where having no when to prune which different kind, it's a challenge for me. So I like that.
Yes, well, I still love my honeysuckle because, again, it's our native coral honeysuckle. But on the other hand, I have to admit, I do like a good vining, climbing rose still. I'm sorry, it's my Victorian background, but anyway. But the next one is, how do we remove vines? And we talk about vines, and some we can touch, some we can't, and so many people have problems. So, Shanna, you were saying when you were walking through the woods the other day, when you were at Dragon Run.
Yeah, when I was at Dragon Run, I'm looking at a beautiful birch, and I go to touch it, but I didn't pay attention to the vines that were wrapping around it, and it turned out to be poison ivy.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
So, no, thankfully, I quickly washed my hands.
Yes.
But still, what if I would have touched my face and the oils and started a crazy reaction?
It's kind of like pulling taffy.
So, yeah, so important for people when they walk through the forest, just be careful. You can't identify it. Don't touch it.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, then how do you suggest people remove poison ivy?
We remove a lot of poison ivy and English ivy at Manchester Gardening. And what we stress to everyone that is in this area is to wear proper protection. So we provide latex, nitrile gloves. We can do Tyvek suits and Tyvek booties. And we also stress, not touching your face when you're gardening, period. You got to use the back of your hand. Don't touch your face. Yeah. And then when you're taking off, your gloves, taking inside out and taking the Tyvek suit inside out. Mm-hmm. So that's how we address that.
That's excellent advice. You can even get a face shield.
You can, yeah. Always wear safety glasses, even if you're pulling weeds. I've gotten so much dirt deflected by safety glasses just from pulling weeds.
Absolutely.
So.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh.
I just got to ask a quick question.
Sure.
Is it an aging thing? Because I know that now when I'm starting to pull ivy, I'm starting to have a reaction to it, which I didn't have in the past.
I don't know. I noticed that my skin's more sensitive, but that's just...
Okay.
I don't know if that's
I was just wondering, just because I was getting older.
No, I was told that the more you're exposed to poison ivy, the higher, the more that you have a chance of starting to get it. Okay? So, yes, so sorry. Just try to do your best to avoid it.
I'll try.
We have another question here about tree plantings, and I'm going to jump to, our favorite trees. We're talking about trees, and, everybody has a favorite tree. Mine's a sourwood. I love our native sourwood tree. So do you have a favorite tree, Shanna?
Yeah, the Georgia peach.
Yeah.
I like the product.
You like the product. Talking about true vegetable gardener.
And the blooms, because it's beautiful pink.
Well, how about our landscape design here, Greta?
My favorite is Southern Magnolia.
The big one or Little Gem?
Oh, the big one. Don't give me a cultivar. I want the straight species. No, I grew up in a magnolia. I mean, my next door neighbor, Mrs. Howell, had a magnolia tree, and as kids, she allowed us to play in it and, just grow up in it. And it's that smell. It just reminds me of summers in Wilmington.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. She just brought this memory back to my mind. The weeping willow. The huge weeping willow that was in my grandmother's yard.
Did you hide under it and play?
Hide, play, climb, swing. Oh, yeah. Thank you.
You all were under trees. I was under a forsythia bush.
I was under a ligustrum on my side, but Mrs. Howell had magnolia.
It was a massive 12-foot forsythia bush, and we cut rooms, and we had our little house under there that we played in until Mr. Smith got upset and cut it down because he didn't want us on his property. We had a blast before then. So.
Yeah.
But aren't plants wonderful, bringing back memories, but also creating memories?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes.
Yep. Every house I have lived in, I've planted one. So hopefully my children will be able to climb in ours.
I have to admit, I have to. I have planted a southern magnolia in every house too. But when you design and plant, do you specify your plants as individuals or do you put them in groups?
Well, it kind of depends. I mean, if you're trying to foster a lot of habitat for plants, you want to do groupings of plant materials and layering of plant materials. But if you have that one client that's like, I really want a cherry tree, that's fine. We'll do a specimen of that, but if we're fostering habitat, we would want to group things together.
Yes. How do you address, I've planted so many trees over the course of my career, just so many, but I've always put them on a public property, public park at Maymont. But I was just wondering, how do you tell a homeowner, here's this tree, it's going to be big and beautiful one day, you probably won't see it.
But I think that's why people plant trees, because they have hope for the future, They have hope that that's going to provide shade maybe for that next family that moves into that house. That's what my hope is. I don't know if that's true or not, but...
Yeah.
Or the cherries that I planted, the cherry trees. They'll feed the birds and they'll feed the next generations that come behind me.
Mm-hmm. That's very true. That's very true. But I think of next generations too, people moving into a house. Stephanie Martin has asked, hi Stephanie, my dear friend, how can, what are the best resources to use for people to come and have the trees identified on their yard so that they can then learn how to properly prune, which is, pruning an oak is very different from a cherry, even the timing and such. So what do you suggest, Greta?
I mean, we provide, consulting services, but also so does Master Gardeners. They can come and identify plant materials for you as well. I don't think they charge as well.
And also your local certified arborist. Find My Arborist online can hook you into certified arborists that are professionals in their field. They would love to come and be able to share information with you. So, well, we're out of time, and Greta, I just thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Peggy.
Yes,
Thank
and
you.
Shanna, thank you. As always, it's a joy.
It's fun. Thank you.
And thank you for watching. We hope we've inspired you to plant the champion tree of the future. But remember to sign up for our monthly newsletter at vpm.org/VHG for gardening information and advice from me and other members of the team. Our Facebook page is also full of gardening tips, so be sure to visit us there too. I look forward to being with you again soon, and until then, remember, gardening is for everyone, and we are all growing and learning together. Happy gardening.
Production funding for Virginia Homegrown is made possible by
Strange's Florist, Greenhouses, and Garden Centers, serving Richmond for over 90 years, with 2 florist shops, 2 greenhouses, and a garden center, located throughout the Metro Richmond area. Strange's, every bloomin' time.
and by